right, Sean Zattel with the legendary Hall of Fame Jim Lampley, co-hosting the exclusive viewer chat on ppv.com for this weekend's doubleheader with Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez. Jim, what do you think of Gervonta Davis now that you've gotten closer to him? This fight week, viewing him, and then I believe you interviewed him in the lead up to this fight as well, right?
Got to know him a little bit. 27 knockouts in 29 fights. That in itself is impressive. I think what's even more impressive is that he does it in an unusual style. Most times when you see a guy who has 27 knockouts in 29 fights, it's because when he gains an advantage, he rains punches on the opposition and outlands them until he's managed to get his point across. Tank is to some degree the opposite. He's very selective. He is highly technical. He gets an advantage and begins to press it and choose it in such a way that ultimately it yields the knockout result. But he's not doing it by raining fire on the opponent. So it's pretty hard to use his offense against him. And I think that may be the point of what he's doing. But it makes him a extremely effective fighter within the current range of possibilities.
Speaking of current times and everything, he is definitely resonating here in the United States and moving the needle. What do you think it is overall, just the whole pack? What is it that's resonating with him, making him move the needle?
The whole social media ethos, the insulting opponents and insulting the whole world on your own behalf. I'm not a fan and I'm not a part of it, but Tank is very effective at using social media. His favorite foil is Ryan Garcia, and now Garcia has, of course, put himself behind the eight ball in harm's way in such a way that somebody like Tank can take perfect advantage of it to continue to build his own identity and his own preeminence within that particular audience group.
Well, off of social media, dealing with him personally, what were your impressions of him?
He was nice to me.
Yeah.
And I hadn't expected that. I had been concerned, that generationally and culturally and just making assumptions that there was no real basis for. I wondered whether I would have trouble with him in the interview. It was the opposite. It was a fun interview. He was very accommodating and very genteel and thoughtful, and I liked him a lot.
Does he remind you of any fighters you called and covered in the HBO days?
James Toney.
He's here. Yeah.
Not that's part of why I'm thinking of James is because he's here. Yeah, James was a perfect example of a guy that you worried about whether you're going to be able to get along with him, and at the end of the day, he was a dream. So he reminds me a little bit of James Toney. And by the way, I said to James Toney, he's a selective power puncher who doesn't put himself in harm's way to do damage. Who is that like? And he said, James Toney. So I'll give him the comparison if he likes it.
Well, we certainly is a talented fighter with really great speed and power. Is he as elite a fighter as he is a draw? Is he a better draw than he is a truly elite pound-for-pound fighter, or is he truly both?
Well, we've got time for him to prove that,
right.
And I don't think a knockout win over Ryan Garcia qualifies you for top of the pound-for-pound list, but it's a good credential. Now he's very widely favored to beat Frank Martin. Frank Martin is not a terribly dissimilar fighter, but probably doesn't have as much explosiveness and one-punch power as Tank has. That's just a guess on my part. I haven't tasted either of their punches.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Tank is pretty heavily expected within this media room to beat Frank Martin, and so he'd better go beat him.
How do you assess Martin's chances?
He's a counterpuncher. He's a precise boxer. He's trained by a very respected trainer. He is certainly not a no-hoper. He's a guy who has a chance if he lands the right shot in the right place, and he claims he did that in a sparring session to upset Tank's apple cart.
Do you think, is that a psychological edge for him, or Gervonta's probably not?
I wasn't at the sparring session. I can't tell
I was,
you.
by the way.
You were?
I was, yeah.
Did something really happen?
I would have to just, what happens in the gym. I'll have to tell you when we finish up the interview.
All right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's fascinating. That means there is a story there.
There is.
Because Sean Vitale was there. So it must be something interesting. You'll let me know.
Yes, Jim. If he wins this fight, what's the best fight that makes the most sense? Is it a rematch with Cruz or Garcia? Do you want to see Shakur Stevenson?
A rematch with Cruz would be exciting.
Yeah.
A rematch with Garcia would be exciting. Everybody is looking for somebody to fight Shakur Stevenson, but of course that means a technical boxing match, most likely, and I think people want to see Tank explode. So let's see a couple more explosions, and then that will get us in the right level of interest for Shakur.
And lastly, Jim,